Real-Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In Mississippi, a major riot in Oxford. In Washington, a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In Alabama, Dr. Martin Luther King is attacked. The Los Angeles Dodgers can't score a run, and Cassius Clay can't close his mouth. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
Now, a cigarette that's low in tar and nicotine, high in menthol flavor. New Montclair. Just enough in every puff makes every puff a pleasure. Smoke Montclair. New from the American Tobacco Company.
In Oxford, Mississippi last night, James Meredith, a 29-year-old Air Force veteran, became the first Negro admitted to the University of Mississippi. In response, hundreds of whites, many from out of state, rioted on the campus at Oxford. Just after Mr. Meredith was admitted, multiple cars loaded with passengers began pulling into the campus. A large crowd then gathered behind Confederate flags in front of the main building called the Lyceum, and the rioters charged repeatedly toward U.S. Marshals who were stationed there. 29 marshals received gunshot wounds, and many others were injured by bricks, broken glass, and acid flung from bottles. The acid had apparently been taken from the college chemistry laboratories. At the height of the riot, just after midnight, it appeared the marshals would not be able to hold the Lyceum. But the arrival this morning of a detachment of Mississippi National Guardsmen, combined with the firing of tear gas ordered by Chief U.S. Marshal James McShane, finally dispersed the rioters. The long controversy over the admission of Mr. Meredith entered the crisis stage last Tuesday in Jackson, the state capital, when Governor Ross Barnett and other state officials openly defied a federal court order by physically blocking Mr. Meredith from enrolling on the Jackson campus. Accompanying Mr. Meredith that day were Chief U.S. Marshal McShane and John Doerr of the Justice Department. The confrontation between Mr. Doerr and Governor Barnett was captured by TV cameras.
Governor Barnett, we're going to leave these summons here with you, and I want to explain to you that the Circuit Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit entered a temporary restraining order at 8:30 this morning enjoining you from interfering in any way with the registration of James Meredith at the University of Mississippi pursuant to order of the court for the full panel of the Fifth Circuit. And we would like to get on now, Governor, with the business of registering Mr. Meredith.
In response to that, I'll say this. I took an oath when I was inaugurated governor of this state to uphold and to try to maintain and perpetuate the laws of Mississippi. I believe in the 10th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which in substance says that all the powers not expressly granted by the Constitution to the federal government belong to the states respectively or to the people when not prohibited by the Constitution. Gentlemen, my conscience is clear. Thank you.
Governor, please accept this. You refuse to permit us to come in the door?
Yes, sir.
All right, Governor. Thank you.
I do that politely.
Thank you. We leave politely.
Come to the man.
On Wednesday, Mr. Meredith again tried to register, this time at the Oxford campus, where Marshal McShane scuffled repeatedly with Mississippi Lieutenant Governor Paul Johnson near the main entrance. Once again, state officials succeeded in blocking Mr. Meredith's registration. By Thursday evening, hundreds of state policemen, sheriffs, and students had gathered at the Oxford campus to resist any new attempt at entry. That night, a Justice Department spokesman said that a third attempt at registration was temporarily on hold because of the possibility of, quote, major violence and bloodshed, unquote. For the next 24 hours, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy conferred with General Creighton Abrams, the Pentagon's Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, about plans to move Army troops into the area. On Friday, Mr. Meredith was asked by a reporter why he wished to enter the University of Mississippi.
Every citizen should have an opportunity to receive an education in his own state. I think he should have an opportunity to receive the best possible education. I'm interested in political science and history, and of course that is the major liberal arts school in the state, and of course it is the best school in the state for these subjects.
He was asked if he felt his life was in danger.
Well, everyone's life is at stake at all times. I think the people of Mississippi are very reasonable. They are firm in their beliefs and convictions, but I think that when they see what's the right thing to do, I think they'll do it. I consider that it's a basic American right that a citizen should have a right to an education. And of course, it's just a matter that for all these years we've been denied this. I think it's something that we should have had all the time. This is, I don't feel it's no great accomplishment if it does work out the way we would hope.
On Saturday night, President Kennedy fully empowered the federal government to end Mississippi's defiance. The president called the Mississippi National Guard into federal service and sent Army troops to Memphis to stand in reserve if more forces were needed. Yesterday afternoon, Governor Barnett capitulated. About an hour later, at 7:30 New York time, President Kennedy delivered a national TV and radio address about the situation in Mississippi.
Mr. James Meredith is now in residence on the campus of the University of Mississippi. All students, members of the faculty, and public officials in both Mississippi and the nation will be able, it is hoped, to return to their normal activities with full confidence in the integrity of American law. I deeply regret the fact that any action by the executive branch was necessary in this case, but all other avenues and alternatives, including persuasion and conciliation, had been tried and exhausted. Had the police powers of Mississippi been used to support the orders of the court instead of deliberately and unlawfully blocking them, had the University of Mississippi fulfilled its standard of excellence by quietly admitting this applicant in conformity with what so many other southern state universities have done, a peaceable and sensible solution would have been possible without any federal intervention.
The president said racial discrimination in this country was a national issue, not just a southern issue.
I recognize that the present period of transition and adjustment in our nation's Southland is a hard one for many people. Neither Mississippi nor any other southern state deserves to be charged with all the accumulated wrongs of the last 100 years of race relations. To the extent that there has been failure, the responsibility for that failure must be shared by us all, by every state, by every citizen.
Finally, the president appealed to Mississippians' patriotism.
You have a great tradition to uphold, a tradition of honor and courage. You have a new opportunity to show that you are men of patriotism and integrity. For the most effective means of upholding the law is not the state policeman or the marshals or the National Guard. It is you. It lies in your courage to accept those laws with which you disagree, as well as those with which you agree. The eyes of the nation and all the world are upon you and upon all of us. And the honor of your university and state are in the balance. I am certain the great majority of the students will uphold that honor. Let us preserve both the law and the peace. Thank you, and good night.
But even as the president spoke, events at Oxford were spiraling out of control, and before long, the campus resembled a battlefield. Besides the marshals, the chief targets of the rioters were newsmen, a number of whom were assaulted and their cameras destroyed. One reporter managed to retain an audio recording of the riot at its peak. Two men were killed in the riot. One was Paul Guillard, a 30-year-old correspondent for the French press agency. Mr. Guillard had been sent to Oxford on his day off because the agency was short on staff, but felt the story should be covered. At 8:30 last night, Mr. Guillard was found in front of a female dormitory, shot in the back. He was pronounced dead on arrival at Oxford Hospital. The other fatality was 23-year-old Ray Gunter of Mississippi, a white jukebox repairman who had visited the campus out of curiosity. A spokesman at Oxford Hospital said Mr. Gunter had died of a gunshot wound in the forehead. No arrests have been made in connection with either killing. This afternoon, Mr. Meredith, under federal bodyguard, attended his first class, Colonial American History. He has been housed in an end room in Baxter Hall, a male residence dormitory. He will have no roommate, and the room next door will be occupied by U.S. Marshals for the indefinite future. As of this broadcast, over 2,000 Army and National Guard troops remain on the campus at Oxford. I'll have more news for you after this message.
When you find a girl whose hair feels like hair, she probably uses Ozone Fluid Net, the hairspray that leaves hair feeling like hair. It's the hairdresser's hairspray in the pink and gray can.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
In the Rose Garden of the White House this morning, General Maxwell Taylor, 61 years old, was sworn in as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff by Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. The Attorney General, who had been up all night dealing with the events in Mississippi, arrived at the ceremony after a few minutes' nap and a shave. President Kennedy, who had had only a few hours of sleep himself, praised General Taylor's broad experience and combat record in World War II and Korea.
I have worked very intimately with General Taylor, where he has been the military representative of the President, and working closely with me as a liaison with the chiefs. And we're particularly glad to have General Taylor with his broad experience, his distinguished combat record in Europe and in the Pacific, in Korea, who has, I think, comprehends and divines the great strategic and tactical problems which face the United States and the free world today.
This afternoon, General Taylor gave a brief news conference at the Pentagon.
I'm looking forward with real anticipation to my new assignment in the Pentagon. I find in this building, the old Pentagon, a new atmosphere and a new approach to the problems of defense, which to me are most heartening. I refer to such things as the rediscovery of the need for conventional forces, the recognition of subversive insurgency as an important form of modern conflict, and the willingness to make hard decisions in the controversial areas of defense.
One of the general's primary tasks will be to find solutions to those quote-unquote problems of defense as manifested in South Vietnam. A year ago, General Taylor was sent to that country by the president on a fact-finding trip. The following month, on the general's recommendation, the U.S. began sending military equipment and guerrilla warfare specialists to advise and train the forces of President Ngo Dinh Diem. Many of these so-called advisors, which now number roughly 12,000, have participated in combat operations as well. Last Friday, General David Shoup, Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps, finished his own fact-finding tour of South Vietnam. After describing the war as complex and often frustrating, he urged his fellow Americans to be more patient, adding, quote, "I am quite sure that no panacea is going to eliminate this Viet Cong enemy overnight, but I've found plenty of the main ingredients for success in Vietnam: spirit, good training, and plenty of bullets," unquote. In Birmingham, Alabama Friday, Dr. Martin Luther King was assaulted by 24-year-old Roy James, a member of the so-called American Nazi Party. The 6-foot, 200-pound Mr. James struck the much smaller Dr. King twice in the face, in front of 300 stunned audience members. The minister had been addressing the annual convention of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Following the attack, Dr. King, who preaches nonviolence, made no move to retaliate, nor did anyone else in the room. Instead, the minister calmly asked Mr. James the reason for the attack. Mr. James said he had become enraged when Dr. King announced that the entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. would give a benefit performance for the conference in December. Mr. James denounced Mr. Davis for having married a white woman, and then accused Dr. King of advocating race mixing. At this point, the police arrived, and though Dr. King told them he did not wish to press charges, Mr. James was taken into custody, and within 3 hours, he had been questioned, taken to court, found guilty of assault and battery, and sentenced to 30 days in prison and a fine of $25 and costs. Dr. King suffered bruising on his left cheekbone and swelling near the ear. Sports, right after this.
Who needs marriage? I can wash my own clothes cleaner, whiter, brighter with new Fab with Duratex.
9 days ago, the San Francisco Giants trailed the National League leading Los Angeles Dodgers by 4 games. Tonight, the Giants are 1 win away from facing the New York Yankees in the 1962 World Series. The Dodgers, having suffered one of the most incredible final week collapses in Major League history, ended the regular season with the same record as the Giants. This forced Los Angeles into a 3-game playoff with San Francisco, evoking nightmare flashbacks of the Dodgers' 1951 collapse and subsequent 3-game playoff with the Giants. The Giants, who took Game 1 of the 51 series 3-1, won tonight's playoff opener as well, crushing the Dodgers at Candlestick Park by a score of 8-0. With his entire pitching staff having staggered down the stretch, Dodgers manager Walter Alston turned in desperation today to his left-handed ace, Sandy Koufax, who's been mostly sidelined for the past 2 months with a circulatory ailment in the index finger of his left hand. From the very first inning today, it was clear the southpaw was not his best self on the mound. He did retire the first 2 batters, but then Felipe Alou split the gap in left field with a double, and up to the plate came the amazing Willie Mays.
Koufax is set, kicks and throws, fastball, swung on, hit deep to right field. There's a well-hit ball, and it is a home run for Willie Mays. Willie Mays has just pounded a home run over the right center field fence, scoring Philippe Alou ahead of him to put the Giants out in front 2-0.
In the bottom of the second, Koufax fared no better. After a leadoff home run by third baseman Jim Davenport and a hard single by catcher Ed Bailey, Sandy's night was through. San Francisco's Billy Pierce, on the other hand, gave one of his finest pitching efforts in a Giant uniform, hurling a complete game 3-hit shutout. With 1 out in the bottom of the 6th, Willie Mays, who put the Giants in the playoffs yesterday with a critical home run against Houston, put an exclamation point on today's victory.
L.A. has picked up just 2 base hits. 2 singles off Billy Pierce. Pitch swung off of Mays. There's a high drive deep to right field. There it goes. One of the most phenomenal ball players of our time has just hit his 2nd home run here this afternoon. Willie Mays, his 49th home run to put the Giants out in front 4-0.
Los Angeles has now failed to score a single run in the last 30 innings of play. Tomorrow, the Dodgers will pitch 25-game winner Don Drysdale against Jack Sanford in Los Angeles. It'll be Drysdale's 4th appearance in 9 days. If the Dodgers lose, their season is done. And finally tonight, after Sonny Liston's first-round knockout of Floyd Patterson in Chicago Tuesday night, it was reported that 20-year-old Cassius Clay said he could knock out Liston, the new heavyweight champion, in 4 rounds. Wednesday morning, Clay issued the following clarification, quote, "No, I didn't say I'd knock out Liston in 4. I said I'd knock out Archie Moore in 4. Liston will take longer. I'll knock him out in 8, unquote. Clay went on to call the Liston-Patterson fight an embarrassment to boxing, adding, quote, "The champion of the world should be able to take a beating longer than 2 minutes, unquote. Clay hopes to surpass the now dethroned Floyd Patterson as the youngest heavyweight champion in history.
Well, yes, I would love to break Floyd Patterson's record. As you know, today is the jet age. Everybody's trying to break records. Man says that he'll be on the moon by 1970. One man said that they're going to make cars that'll run by sunlight. Well, those are pretty game predictions. Well, I predicted I'll be the heavyweight champion by the time I'm 21.
Clay's constant chattering has become as much a personal trademark as his lightning-fast speed in the ring. This weekend, one newsman issued an unusual challenge to the talkative Clay.
Let me see you close your mouth and just keep it closed.
Well, you know that's impossible.
No, keep it closed.
You know that's impossible. I'm the greatest. And I'm knocking out all bums. And if you get too small, I'll knock you out.
Now close your mouth, but just let me see if you can keep it closed for 10 seconds.
Well, that's impossible. You know that's impossible.
And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Monday, October 1st, 1962. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.